Three colors: blue, white, red. At first glance, they seem like nothing more than the colors of the French flag, but in the hands of Christophe Kieślowski, they became something much more profound. Not just colors, not just symbolism, but emotions, ideas, and perhaps one of the greatest trilogies ever made. This is the story of how Three Colors became a masterpiece. For decades, trilogies have usually meant continuing one story: The Lord of the Rings, The Godfather, Before Sunrise, but the Three Colors trilogy does something different. Each film tells its own completely separate story, different characters, different lives, different conflicts, yet somehow, by the end, they all feel connected in a way that's difficult to explain but impossible to forget. Released between 1993 and 1994, the trilogy consists of blue, white, and red, each inspired by one of the ideals of the French Republic: liberty, equality, fraternity. But Kieślowski wasn't interested in making political films. He wanted to add something much more personal. What does freedom actually feel like? Can equality ever truly exist? And what does it really mean to be connected to another person?
Tak, to jest scena, w której Binoche gdzieś mniej więcej w 40 minucie, w 50 minucie filmu spotyka mężczyznę, który ją kocha. To jest scena, której towarzyszy muzyka. Jeszcze nie wiemy dokładnie skąd ta.
Blue follows Julie, a woman who survives a tragic accident that takes away her husband and daughter. In a single moment, everything that once defined her life disappears. Instead of rebuilding what she has lost, Julie makes a different choice. She tries to erase herself. She sells her home, cuts ties with people who care about her, moves to a place where no one knows her name. She believes that if she has nothing left to love, then she has nothing left to lose. To Julie, freedom isn't about possibility, it's about escape. But Christoph Kieslowski quietly asks a question that lingers throughout the entire film. Can anyone truly become free by abandoning every emotional connection? Or are the people we love the very things that give our lives meaning? What's remarkable is that Blue never tries to answer these questions. Instead, it trusts the audience to sit with Julie's silence. There are moments where almost nothing is said. The camera simply watches. It waits. It lingers on Julie's face long enough for us to notice the emotions she refuses to express. Most filmmakers would cut away. Kieslowski doesn't, because grief rarely arrives with perfect words. Sometimes it exists only in a glance, a breath, or the emptiness left behind after unimaginable loss. Then there's the color itself. Blue isn't just a visual motif. It becomes Julie's emotional landscape. It appears in reflections, in glass, in the swimming pool she returns to again and again, in the soft light that surrounds her. The color isn't trying to symbolize sadness in a simplistic way. Instead, it feels like grief has seeped into every corner of her world. No matter where she goes, it follows. And perhaps the film's greatest emotional weapon is its music, composed by Zbigniew Preisner. The score doesn't simply accompany Julie's journey, it interrupts it. Just as Julie attempts to suppress her memories, the music crushes into moments of silence, refusing to let her forget. It's as if the soundtrack becomes the voice of emotions just trying to bury. The film understands something many stories about grief often overlook. Healing isn't about forgetting, it's learning to live with what's been lost. By the end of Blue, freedom no longer means living without attachments. It means finding the courage to keep living despite them. Julie doesn't escape her grief, she learns to carry it, and that's what makes Blue so quietly devastating. It isn't a film about moving on. It's a film about discovering that love doesn't disappear simply because the people we love are gone. Sometimes it remains in the silence, in the music, and in every shade of blue that refuses to fade. If blue is quiet and mournful, Wise is its complete opposite. It's playful, awkward, sometimes even absurd. At first glance, it almost feels like a comedy, but beneath its humor lies one of the trilogy's sharpest observations about pride, love, and power. The film follows Carol, a polished hairdresser living in Paris whose life unravels after a humiliating divorce. He loses his wife, his business, his money, even his sense of dignity. Stranded in a country where he no longer belongs, Carol returns to Poland, determined to rebuild the life that was taken from him. But what begins as a story of survival slowly transforms into something else, an obsession, not simply with success, but with restoring what he believes is balance. This is where Kieślowski begins to question the meaning of equality. Is equality something we genuinely believe in? Or does it only matter once we've experienced what it feels like to stand beneath someone else? Carol spends much of the film trying to reverse the imbalance between himself and the woman who once held all the power. Yet every step he takes toward equality seems to bring him closer to becoming the very person he resented. Unlike Blue, where grief is expressed through silence, White speaks through irony. The film is filled with awkward pauses, uncomfortable humor, and situations that seem almost ridiculous. But those moments aren't there to simply make us laugh. They expose how fragile our pride can be, how easily love becomes possession, and how quickly fairness can turn into revenge. Visually, White feels colder than the other films. The bright whites and pale winter landscapes create a world that feels emotionally distant. Even when Carol begins to regain control of his life, the images rarely feel warm or comforting. It's as if equality, when pursued through resentment, can never truly satisfy us. And perhaps that's the film's greatest irony. Carol achieves much of what he set out to accomplish. He regains status, power, control, but none of it fills the emptiness that first drove him forward. By the end of White, equality is no longer presented as a simple ideal. It's revealed to be far more complicated, because relationships aren't measured like scales. Love isn't something that can be balanced through victory or defeat. Sometimes the moment we believe we've finally evened the score, it's the moment we've lost what mattered most. Then comes Red, perhaps the most celebrated film of the trilogy, and the one that quietly brings everything full circle. At its center is a simple encounter. A young model named Valentine accidentally hits a dog with her car. Trying to return the injured animal, she meets a retired judge who spends his days listening to the private phone calls of his neighbors. It's an unusual beginning, one that feels almost insignificant. Yet from that single moment grows one of cinema's most profound reflection on coincidence, destiny, and human connection. Unlike Blue, which asks whether freedom can exist without love, or White, which questions whether equality can ever truly be achieved, Red asks something even more universal. Are our lives connected in ways we'll never fully understand? Throughout the film, strangers pass one another. Lives overlap. Small choices ripple into unexpected consequences. Again and again, Kieślowski reminds us that the most meaningful moments in our lives often begins with accidents. A wrong turn, a missed call, a conversation we never expected to have. What makes Red extraordinary is that it never treats these moments as grand miracles. Instead, it finds beauty in ordinary encounters. A conversation, a shared silence, a simple act of kindness. The film suggests that fraternity isn't merely about friendship. It's about recognizing ourselves in other people, even those we've never met before. Visually, Red is perhaps the trilogy's most expressive film. The color red appears almost everywhere, on billboards, curtains, clothing, streetlights. At first, it seems impossible to ignore, yet the more film surrounds us with red, the less it feels like decoration. Instead, it begins to feel like an invisible thread quietly connecting every character. The cinematography reinforces this idea through windows, mirrors, and carefully layered compositions. Characters are constantly framed through glass or separated by reflections, reminding us that people can feel incredibly close and impossibly distant at the very same time. And then comes the ending. Without revealing its final moments, it's enough to say that Kieślowski finds a way to unite not only the characters of Red, but the entire trilogy itself. In retrospect, Blue, White, and Red no longer feels like separate films. They become different perspectives on the same human experience. Perhaps that's why Red resonates so deeply. It reminds us that every stranger carries a story, that every chance encounter has the potential to change a life, and that even when our paths seem completely separate, they may already be intertwined in ways we cannot yet see. If Blue teaches us that freedom is impossible without accepting grief, and White reminds us that equality cannot be measured by power, then Red offers one final thought, that the meaning of life may not be found in ourselves at all, but in the invisible threads that connects us to everyone else. 3 films, 3 ideals, 3 colors, and together, one of cinema's most beautiful meditations on what it means to be human. The emotional power of the trilogy also comes from composer Zbigniew Preissner. His music doesn't merely accompany the scenes. It becomes another character, sometimes overwhelming, sometimes silent, and always emotional. Without it, the trilogy simply wouldn't have the same emotional weight. More than 30 years later, the Three Colors trilogy remains one of cinema's greatest achievements because it understands something, that cinema isn't only about telling stories, it's making us feel things we struggle to explain: grief, hope, forgiveness, connection. These films don't give easy answers. They simply invite us to sit with the questions. And perhaps that's why they continue to resonate with audiences decades later. The Three Colors trilogy reminds us that freedom is complicated, equality is fragile, and that every stranger we meet may be connected to our lives we'll never fully understand. Three films, three colors, one masterpiece.